So welcome to today's Dharma talk, which is about the awakened heart, Metta and the Brahma Viharas. So as we've been hearing on retreat, woven through the Buddha's expansive teachings are these amazing pathways to cultivate the boundless heart of awakening. And these qualities of the heart are virtues as well as practices. And as we've been hearing, they include loving kindness or metta, compassion, Karuna, appreciative joy, Mudita, and equanimity or Upekka. So these four heart qualities are known as the Brahma Viharas. They're also known as the divine abodes and the four immeasurables. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that these heart qualities are necessities, not luxuries. And he says that without them, humanity cannot survive. I love what Venerable Analayo says about the Brahma Viharas. He wrote that they are forms of abiding in a celestial condition while still being human on earth. So Brahma is the name for God, which at the time was the god of Brahmins, and also known as the source of love in ancient India. And Vihara means place of dwelling. So Mal has written in his upcoming yet to be released book that the central function in the path of the Brahma Viharas is to purify the mind, these are Mal's words, subdue negative emotions, and lead to the state of deep concentration. The heart qualities are relational, and they're the foundation of all respectful, healthy, and dignified societies, communities, families, and relationships. They're at the core of all ethical thought, speech, and action. And they're qualities that we can cultivate in the midst of all of the conditions and events that touch our lives, including when we get buffeted by the worldly winds of the lovely and the unlovely moments, the challenging and the easeful. The four heart qualities also help us to bear witness to what can feel unbearable. And they're profound pathways to awakening and liberation, as well as noble places from where we can live our lives. Loving kindness or metta includes the qualities of warm friendliness and this universal goodwill. It's the ability where we can see the good, not just in others, but also in ourselves. It's based on tuning in to happiness and also tuning into the moments of wonder, awe, and beauty that we experience, as well as the aspiration for happiness now and in the future for ourselves and all beings. Compassion or karuna is a human response to suffering, and it's said that it's like the sensitivity and the quivering of the heart in response to pain and suffering, together with a commitment to alleviate suffering, so that wish. Appreciative joy or mudita is the joy that we might notice arising when we can witness the successes, virtues, and happiness of others and also of ourselves. Equanimity or Upekka is like a groundedness. It's a sense of having emotional balance and even-mindedness even in the midst of what a Chinese Taoist described as the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows that we may experience in the unfolding of our human lives. Equanimity also involves a sense of impartiality towards all beings, where we can equally treat everyone as worthy of compassion and kindness. So these qualities lie in every human heart, and the teachings encourage us to abide in these divine abodes and set the intention to do that in every moment of our lives. There's a beautiful Tibetan saying, and they say, "Wherever my gaze may fall, may it be filled with tenderness and respect." The heart qualities are energetic flows and ways that we relate to self and others. They're like, we can think about them like aspirations, intentions. They're also meditation practices. And importantly, they're antidotes that can heal division and othering through dissolving the defilements of greed, hatred, and ignorance. So we can think about them like a healing medicine. And a few weeks ago, I was so fortunate to be at the Metta convention in Sydney, where there were many monastics that gathered from all over the world. And there were also a lot of lay people that were there too. And while there were many, many gems and insightful teachings that emerged through the talks and the discussions, for me, a moment of clear seeing came at the very end of the conference, hearing the organisers, who their organisation is the Metta Centre, talk and introduce themselves and talk about their system of governance within their organisation. So the Metta Centre's system of governance is based, as you can imagine, firmly in the Dharma. We were introduced to the director of Mettā, who ensures the upholding of love and kindness within the organisation. We were also introduced to the director of Dharma, whose role was to ensure the flow of ethics and values and wisdom that are in alignment with the ancient teachings. Then we also met the director of process, whose role is to ensure that relationships are harmonious and based in right speech and right action. And it just made me contemplate, what are the possibilities of all of these oppressive systems that we find happening, that we're engulfed in the world, that seem to perpetuate systems of domination that are really making people quite unwell at the moment. What would happen if the world adopted the Metta Centre's foundation of governance? I mean, mind boggles. So that led me to contemplate even more, to imagine if governments gave importance to treating the causes and conditions of suffering and developing treatment plans based on happiness instead of systems that seem to feed they seem to feed greed, hatred, and ignorance. And if we were able to kind of turn towards treating symptoms instead of the underlying causes of suffering. And it's what Albert Einstein pointed to when he said, a problem can't be solved by the same thinking that created the problem in the first place. In many writers, including Christina Feldman in her beautiful book, The Boundless Heart, describes the interwoven nature of the heart qualities. And Longchenpa, who was a prominent teacher of Tibetan Buddhism in the 14th century, said, "Out of the soil of friendliness grows the beautiful bloom of compassion, watered by the tears of joy, sheltered beneath the cool shade of the tree of equanimity." Metta guards compassion from impartiality. Compassion protects metta and joy from forgetfulness and stirs friendliness to widen circles of concern. Compassion protects equanimity from falling into indifference. And joy can resource the heart and also protect us from being overwhelmed by the immensity of pain in the world. And these qualities aren't esoteric, transcendent states, but they're qualities that are found within each of our human hearts. And we can think of them as being elements that can be cultivated, trained, and nourished. Sometimes we can think that we might have to be enlightened or even a monastic, but it's really important to remember that these seeds and threads run through all our hearts. But as we've been following on this retreat, we need mindfulness to cultivate presence and cultivate insight, clear seeing and wisdom. And we also need the heart qualities of kindness, compassion, appreciative joy and equanimity to powerfully support clear seeing. The heart qualities can help us balance emotional, physical, mental and spiritual pain when we feel close to overwhelm. There are many moments that we have as humans when we may feel like we want to shut down, or we can almost feel our hearts automatically closing, and this can be a response to pain and exhaustion and overwhelm. But if we think about these precious, immeasurable powers that we have in the heart and think of them as antidotes to pain and suffering, then a path of possibilities opens up. And interestingly, this talk originally was going to be about the 4 Brahma Viharas, but because metta was given its own discourse by the Buddha and is really the foundation of all the Brahma Viharas, even though it's not more important than the others, metta does lie at the core of the awakened heart. And so I was thinking that it might be helpful just to kind of dive a little bit more deeply into metta today. Metta speaks of immeasurable kindness, and this is at both the individual and, what we learnt from the Metta Center, the possibilities for, spreading that out into the world collectively. And there's always a little bit of difficulty in the translation from Sanskrit or Pali to English. English is quite a different language, whereas in comparison to Sanskrit and Pali that have many words that describe meditation and the mind, we're sort of, there are less to describe some of these things in English. But other English words that can help us to understand what metta is include friendliness, amicability, goodwill, altruism, unconditional love, and non-violence. Metta is a pure love that has no conditions. And this can be quite different to how we may have grown up thinking about love. Because love often in our Western culture is believed to be something outside us. And this can lead to all sorts of almost like a selfish belief that someone else has to fulfill our happiness. That's, codependent patterns. But because all of us are relationship experts, because we all know we know the problematic part of clinging and grasping, and where this can lead to us feeling shut down, let down, disappointed. And we also know that this is a conditional type of love that is very problematic and based on attachment. Stories remind us that the Buddha gave a discourse on metta to help monks who were entering a forest to practice meditation. And when the monks entered the forest, the winds howled and the trees shook. And the monks felt afraid, and they ran from the forest, believing they'd disturbed the forest spirits who didn't want them in the forest. But the Buddha, when he heard about this from the monks, understood that fear had created a disturbance of the mind for the monks. And he told them to go back to the forest and begin meditating on sending metta, sending loving kindness to the forest spirits and all beings. And guess what happened? The monks settled, and they were able to remain in the forest all night peacefully meditating. So the Buddha was asking the monks in the forest to cultivate boundless love in their hearts for all beings, not just for the forest spirit. And this was without discrimination. And this story was 2,500 years ago, in a time where this was a pretty radical act in a society full of castes and segregation. But in this spirit of meditating forest monks, it reminded me, and I just had to share them, of the beloved poet Michael Leunig, who wrote, "There are only two feelings, love and fear. There are only two languages, love and fear. There are only two activities, love and fear. There are only two motives, two procedures, two frameworks, love and fear, love and fear." So with metta at the foundation of the other heart qualities, we can find often the courage to bear witness to and reject some of the things that are arising in the world today that include social injustice, racism, classism, homophobia, transphobia, genderism, and all of the other isms that are, causing suffering. It's through the four heart qualities that we find the antidotes to the kileshas, or the defilements of the mind, that include feelings of anger, hatred, or superiority. Feelings that feed othering and segregation. And these are also, Mal described them earlier, that they're the fire enemies of the heart. Metta is such a vital love in protecting relationships, and it's as important to relationships as the air we breathe is to life. We're going to be chanting together later the Metta Sutta, but I'd just like to give you offer another version today, which is Thich Nhat Hanh's translation of the Metta Sutta. And the words are: someone who wants to attain peace should practice being upright, humble, and capable of using loving speech. They will know how to live simply and happily with senses calmed, without being covetous and carried away by the emotions of the majority. Let them not do anything that will be disapproved of by the wise ones. And this is what they contemplate. May everyone be happy and safe, and may all hearts be filled with joy. May all beings live in security and in peace. Beings who are frail or strong, tall or short, big or small, invisible or visible, near or far away, already born or yet to be born. May all of them dwell in perfect tranquility. Let no one do harm to anyone. Let no one put the life of anyone in danger. Let no one out of anger or ill will wish anyone any harm. Just as a mother loves and protects her only child at the risk of her own life, cultivate boundless love to offer to all living beings in the entire cosmos. Let our boundless love pervade the whole universe, above, below, and across. Our love will know no obstacles. Our heart will absolutely be freed from hatred and enmity. Whether standing or walking, sitting or lying down, as long as we are awake, we should maintain this mindfulness of love in our own heart. This is the noblest way of living, free from wrong views, greed, and sensual desires, living in beauty and realizing perfect understanding. Those who practice boundless love will certainly transcend birth and death. So Aya Kema, who is pretty amazing, suggests that perhaps it's the English translation of metta that may be problematic in our understanding, because metta being closer to the word love, and in Western culture, when we look at how we understand love, which is often about fantasies about finding the one and living happily ever after. But we know that this is a myth. So we might get into a relationship with someone, and then we can quickly find out that that relationship is challenging, and that the person that we saw through rose-colored glasses is a human being also, just like us, and therefore subject to illness, aging, and death. And this person also has free will like us, which means that they can make choices that are all about them, and sometimes leave in their wake a trail of betrayal, hurt, and pain. But it's kind of curious to contemplate that in our Western troubled world, at what point did love cease being about care and instead begin to focus more on the egoic I, me, mine? Was it in the Disney movies where the narratives about love were created and became about living happily ever after before we'd even begun to learn about what love truly is? And because this this real life sense of relationships where there is messiness, there is disconnection, there's irritation, there's boredom, and there's ultimately conflict. And this can mean that our expectations about falling in love and finding the one can be doomed from the beginning when people reveal themselves to be other than our projections. So we've grown up believing that a Cinderella type of love is true love, but we find out later that it's often not enduring, although not in all cases. But in this attachment kind of love, it means that love can ultimately be dukkha. Metta, however, is unconditional love, where we can find that we can give freely this unconditional love without expecting anything in return. And this is the boundless love that we can aspire to cultivate for all beings. So we know through the worldly winds of praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and pain, fame and disrepute, that love as we know it can quickly change course and then sometimes take on the qualities of the near and far enemies of metta. And the near and far enemies of metta begin to arise when the heart begins to close, and just remembering what we were speaking about earlier, that the far enemy of metta is anger, ill will and hostility. And in writing this talk, I remembered this story about my son Lockie when he was 11 years old. Lockie's now 27, and it was back in the days when kids were beginning to communicate on MSN. And Lockie came into the kitchen heartbroken because he'd been dumped by his girlfriend, who delivered a message to him via MSN that said, "Lockie, I used to love you, but now I hate you." And it was like, poor Lockie was heartbroken. But it was, it's just such a reminder of how the worldly winds can change things when love is based on attachment. The near and far enemies are barriers to metta, barriers to the heart. And Rumi spoke about the barriers of the heart when he said, "Our task is not to seek for love, but merely to find all the barriers within ourselves we've built against love." Metta is unconditional love, and it wants for nothing, and it has no boundaries. It's based very much on the understanding of interdependence, that we are all in this together, and as humans, we all walk upon the earth. We breathe the same air and eat the same food. And yet the manifestations of the far enemies of metta in the world just create so much harm and hatred and division, and they also create constructs of segregation and just continue to feed this sense of othering, inequity and injustice. Neuroscientists say that when in our evolutionary history we developed an outer neocortex in our brain, it allowed us to develop mammalian love systems that helped us to survive and care for and protect each other. But this system can so easily be infiltrated and overridden by the defilements that are mediated by our amygdala. And it's why we have a duty of care for all of life on earth, to understand and do our own work in finding these barriers to love, and to find and cultivate our own sense of inner peace that leads to outer peace. In our Western models of education, our minds are trained to intellectualize mental activities. But it's such a problematic thing that the heart in much of contemporary Western world, although I think it's starting to change from what I understand, is not really given a lot of time. And this is in comparison to other cultures that, you know, that value, it's sort of almost like the flip. Attachment in Western psychology refers to this relational template that's laid down in throughout our lives, and Thich Nhat Hanh refers to our storehouse consciousness, which is a really lovely way to think about these patterns that, of attachment that can sometimes be problematic for us. But if we are lucky enough to experience a foundation of love through our childhood, we can come to know and rest in this secure attachment that enables our nervous systems to balance amidst uncertainty and sometimes deep challenges. But for many of us who haven't experienced secure attachment, the pain can be stored, we can think about the pain as being stored in our storehouse consciousness of the mind and body. And this pain will resurface when we're activated unless we're able to process it. And this is where, we judge, we blame, we get angry, we project, and we can even hate. We can close our hearts so we don't have to feel, but this shutting down only creates cycles of samsara that we're desperate to get out of. And it's important to acknowledge too that this doesn't mean that we anger is sometimes an incredibly helpful emotion in standing up to injustice and standing up to things that are not okay. So, we need to have this strength so that we can have boundaries and be strong. One of the most profound understandings through Buddhist psychology is that the heart-mind has a profound capacity to heal given the right causes and conditions. And we can consider the Brahma Viharas as essential medicines along our journey of returning to wholeness. Another really interesting thing about Metta and the Brahma Viharas is that in order to connect with the heart qualities, we need to rest. It's so much harder to access Metta if we're not feeling rested and have a sense of well-being. Rest provides a spaciousness to connect with the heart. And in Plum Village, one day a week is called Lazy Day. And Lazy Day is very honouring of this process of need for deep rest in order for joy to emerge. And, joy going back to being one of the essential factors that the Buddha spoke about on the path of awakening. So these qualities depend on us inclining our heart-mind towards Metta in every moment as a foundation for the heart to expand immeasurably. But sometimes, as we know, also the opposite can come up. And we need to be able to feel safe and secure that we can hold this in order for it to move through energetically. So if there is resistance to Metta happening for you, it's often not uncommon that underneath this there could be fear or even anger or hurt. And it's these things that arise that really are calling for attention with Metta and care. When we resist pain, or we don't feel that we have the resources to face overwhelming pain, we really risk becoming brittle and rigid. But when we can train ourselves to notice, like even the most subtle energetic tightening, we can begin to soften, and this is our practice. Bhikkhu Analayo has done a lot of research on how the Brahma Viharas were used at the time of the Buddha, and he wrote back then that the method that the Buddha spoke about was to abide with a heart of kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, and to radiate these qualities out in all directions. And I think it's good to remember that my sense strongly is that we have these qualities as children, that there's a natural movement of the heart to want to care, to protect, to love, to cherish, and to help. And maybe, just maybe it can become conditioned out of us with life's experiences. I have quite a feisty, imaginative 5-year-old granddaughter called Ava, and it's really interesting to observe. It's like she has a supercharged sensitivity towards the pain of others. And also in this pain of others, there's also like this sensitivity towards suffering and towards injustice. Her empathy feels quite natural and intense, and her paintings, stories, and cards are always about love and joy and kindness. When we, as part of reconnecting to these qualities, it's kind of like a reawakening them. When we recognize the energetic signature and effects of each divine abode, this can help to strengthen them. And in Tibetan Buddhism, the individual Buddhas represent energetic qualities that can remind us of what we carry innately in our consciousness and what can be actively cultivated. For example, green Tara. No, green Tara is not in here. But green Tara is the female essence of awakened love and fierce compassion. She's ready to help with the cries of the world. She's the female essence of awakened love and compassion. And as a fully enlightened female Buddha, green Tara is the actuality of compassion and wisdom, these kind of two wings, like the wings of a bird. In the Tibetan tradition, chanting her mantra, Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Soha, and visualizing her form and meditating on her can help to awaken her energy in our hearts. Her right foot, I think Mal was mentioning, but her right foot is extended just out to the front of her, and her hand is opened, and she's ready to launch herself in to help with the healing of the world. Green Tara has helped me many times over the years, and I've often drawn on her energy to help me. And a few years back, I was on a very quiet prairie in South Dakota for an Indigenous-led gathering, and on this particular night, I was alone in my tent, and my friends had left, and this howling wind blew up, as the wind can often blow in the prairie, and it blew my tent down. And I remember feeling quite afraid and overwhelmed, and strongly feeling this connection to the historical pain on the lands of the Lakota, where where, you know, there's been more than 500 years of like immense injustice and suffering. But as my fear kind of, you know, started to take hold in my mind, I remembered the story of the monks in the forest and the loving kindness that the Buddha urged us to remember. And I began to chant Green Tara's mantra. And I could instantly feel like that help of the energies spiritually, emotionally, and physically, like amidst so much potential to completely freak out that night. So it's really powerful, and it you know, it doesn't have to be Green Tara. As we did in that practice this morning, it's connecting, you know, whatever feels right, however you connect back to that inner sense of love and compassion. In moments of anxiety and uncertainty, connecting with the Brahma Viharas can profoundly help us. It can bring a gentleness and kindness to grief and loss and fear and sadness, and it helps us to stay connected to the vast and limitless ocean of compassion. But the path involves practicing, metabolizing, and embodying these teachings as we've been doing. The Dhammapada encourages us to do this, saying, drop by drop is the water pot filled. Likewise, the wise one, gathered it little by little, fills oneself with good. So these aspirations are not lofty ideals. We don't need to be monastic or even enlightened, but to remember that they are threads of potentiality that run through every human heart. And they are awakened through practices, ethics, and values, exactly in the way that we're practicing on retreat. So go gently this week, and when you rest, know that you're preparing a foundation for the immeasurable heart to awaken. And this is a most radical act of contributing profoundly to this sacred, interdependent world. Thank you for your kind attention.
Sadhu, sadhu.